quiet in the courtroom. The gavel slammed sharply, yet the 7-year-old girl stood, unfazed. Her tiny fingers clutched a binder of papers that could shift everything. Her father was moments from an unjust conviction, and she was his sole chance for rescue. "Your Honor, I'm the defense lawyer," she stated, voice quivering but firm. But none could foresee what would happen next. Before we jump into the tale, please leave a comment below with your location. Enjoy the story. The stark lights of Jefferson County Courthouse flickered overhead as 7-year-old Emma Rodriguez gripped a worn, oversized briefcase nearly her size. Her small hands shook, yet her brown eyes shone with a resolve that would stun veteran attorneys. The security officer gazed down, puzzled. "Little one, are you lost? Where's your mom?" Officer Jenkins asked, his tone kind but worried. Emma straightened her petite frame, clad in a navy dress her late grandmother stitched for church. "I'm here for the Rodriguez case, sir. I'm defending my dad." The officer's brows shot up. In his 15 years at the courthouse, he'd never heard such a thing. "Dear, you can't just—" "I know my task," Emma cut in, her voice cracking slightly but steady. "My dad's innocent, and I'll prove it." 3 months earlier, Michael Rodriguez was arrested for stealing $50,000 from Henderson Construction Company, where he'd been a supervisor for 8 years. The evidence seemed ironclad. Money was funneled to an account in his name. Cameras caught him entering the company vault after hours, and his signature appeared on fake invoices. But Emma knew a truth the police didn't. The night before his arrest, her father came home, worry etched deep in his face. He knelt by her bed and whispered, "Mija, if anything happens to me, know that good people sometimes get blamed for bad acts, but truth always breaks through the shadows." She didn't understand then. She did now. With her mother, Maria, working extra shifts as a nurse to pay bills and unable to hire a lawyer, Emma made a bold choice that shocked all who knew her. She'd represent her father herself. The public library became her haven. Mrs. Patterson, the elderly librarian, watched in awe as this tiny girl borrowed legal books meant for law students, titles like Criminal Law Basics, Courtroom Rules, Evidence, and Testimony, texts heavier than Emma's backpack. "Can you handle these, dear?" Mrs. Patterson asked. "My dad's counting on me," Emma replied simply. Night after night, while other kids watched cartoons, Emma sat at the kitchen table with highlighters and notebooks, learning terms like due process, burden of proof, and reasonable doubt. She slept only 3 hours each night, driven by resolve and peanut butter sandwiches her mother left. The hardest part wasn't grasping the law. It was seeing her father in jail. Through the thick glass divider, Michael Rodriguez looked older, his rough hands pale from no sunlight. His eyes teared up each time he saw his little girl preparing for battle. "Emma, you don't have to do this," he whispered into the phone. "I'll find a way." "No, Daddy," she replied, pressing her small palm to the glass. "You taught me to fight for those you love when they're in trouble." Now in the courthouse's marble hall, Emma checked her watch. A gift from her father, loose on her thin wrist. Court would start in 10 minutes. Judge Harrison had reluctantly agreed to let her defend her father after she recited 3 constitutional amendments and 2 Supreme Court cases from memory in their initial meeting. Prosecutor James Mitchell, the district attorney, laughed when he heard about his opponent. "This'll be my easiest case," he told his staff. But Assistant Prosecutor Robert Williams didn't laugh. Something about the girl's fierce determination made him uneasy, very uneasy, and for good reason. Emma opened her briefcase and drew out a folder marked Evidence. Inside were papers that could change everything. Papers someone had tried hard to hide. Papers proving her father's innocence. What she didn't yet know was that the real culprit was closer than she thought, closer than anyone guessed. As Emma walked toward courtroom 3B, her small steps echoing in the vast hall, she didn't know someone watched her every move, someone who knew exactly what was in that folder, someone who'd do anything to keep those papers buried. The courthouse clock chimed 9 o'clock. The fight of her young life was about to begin. Judge Harrison's gavel echoed through courtroom 3B as Emma Rodriguez stepped through the heavy oak doors. Every head turned. Whispers spread like wildfire in the gallery. "Is that a child? This must be a joke. Where are her parents?" Indeed. But Emma's eyes were only on her father, Michael, at the defendant's table in an orange jumpsuit too big for his shrunken frame. Their gazes met, and he mouthed silently, "I love you, Mija." District Attorney James Mitchell rose, his pricey suit and silver hair commanding respect. At 55, he'd never lost such a clear case. He glanced at Emma with slight amusement. "Your Honor," Mitchell began, his voice booming, "I object to this nonsense. A 7-year-old can't understand criminal law's complexity." Judge Harrison, a stern woman in her 60s, leaned forward. "Mr. Mitchell, this court has ruled on Miss Rodriguez's role. The defendant waived his right to counsel, and Miss Rodriguez has shown enough legal knowledge." Emma stepped forward, her voice clear despite her racing heart. "Your Honor, my father is innocent. The evidence will show someone else stole the money and framed him." The courtroom buzzed with murmurs. Assistant Prosecutor Robert Williams shifted nervously in his seat, hands clenched so tight his knuckles turned white. He kept glancing at Emma's briefcase, sweat beading on his brow despite the cool air. "Mr. Mitchell, give your opening statement," Judge Harrison ordered. Mitchell stood, addressing the jury with practiced ease. "Ladies and gentlemen, this is a simple case of theft. Michael Rodriguez had access to the Henderson construction vault. Footage shows him there after hours. The stolen money was in an account with his name. His signature is on fake invoices. The proof is undeniable." Emma watched the jury's faces closely, as her legal books advised. Mrs. Chen, the retired teacher in seat 4, looked sympathetic. Mr. Thompson, the mechanic in seat 7, seemed skeptical of Mitchell's certainty. When Mitchell finished, Emma stood. Her legs felt weak, but she recalled her father's words. "Courage isn't about not being scared, Mija. It's about doing right even when you are." "Ladies and gentlemen of the jury," Emma began, her young voice carrying well in the large room. "My dad taught me truth is like a diamond buried in mud. It's hard to see at first, but when you clear the dirt, it shines brighter than anything." Some jurors leaned forward, intrigued by the eloquence from such a small person. "The prosecutor wants you to believe my dad stole from people he saw as family. But diamonds don't lie, and neither does my dad. I'll show you evidence the real thief is still free." As Emma sat, she noticed Williams whispering urgently into his phone. His face had gone pale, hands shaking. Something was very wrong, and Emma began to suspect what. The prosecution's first witness was Sarah Henderson, daughter of the company owner. At 32, she managed the firm's finances with care. "Miss Henderson," Mitchell began, "tell us about the missing funds." Sarah's voice was steady but sad. $50,000 vanished from our operating account over 3 months. The money went to an account in Michael Rodriguez's name." Emma saw her father's face crumple. He'd worked for the Hendersons 8 years, building trust project by project. "How did you find this?" Mitchell asked. "Our bookkeeper, Mrs. Garcia, noticed oddities in monthly reports. We checked and found fake invoices for materials never delivered." Mitchell showed the evidence. Bank statements, transfer records, invoices, all pointing to Michael Rodriguez. When Emma's turn came to cross-examine, she stood on a small stool the bailiff provided. "Miss Henderson," Emma began gently, "you said you trusted my dad like family, right?" "Yes, I did. That's why this hurts so much. If someone wanted to steal from your company, they'd need to know a lot about your business, wouldn't they?" Sarah nodded. "Yes, they'd need access to our systems, supplier knowledge, payment schedules, and how to avoid getting caught." "Exactly," Emma said, pulling a document from her briefcase. "Miss Henderson, this lists everyone with access to your systems. Can you read the names for the jury?" Sarah's eyes widened. "Sarah Henderson, Frank Henderson, Mrs. Garcia, Robert Williams?" Her voice trailed off. "Robert Williams," Emma repeated, staring at the assistant prosecutor, now white as a sheet. "That's Mr. Mitchell's assistant, isn't it? The same Robert Williams who worked for Henderson Construction before becoming a lawyer." The courtroom hummed with whispers. Mitchell jumped up. Objection. Relevance. Your Honor, Emma said, her young voice strong. Mr. Williams had full access to Henderson Construction's financial systems. He knew their procedures, schedules, and security. Isn't that relevant to who could have done this? Judge Harrison looked intrigued. Overruled. Continue, Miss Rodriguez. Emma turned to Sarah. When did Mr. Williams leave your company? About 6 months ago to join the prosecutor's office, just 2 months before the thefts began. Sarah's face showed realization. Yes, exactly 2 months. Williams stood abruptly, his chair scraping loudly. Your Honor, I'm unwell. I need to leave. But Emma wasn't finished. Miss Henderson, did Mr. Williams ever ask about your new security after leaving? Mitchell objected again, but Judge Harrison was engaged. I'll allow it. Sarah's voice was faint. Yes. He called several times saying he worried about our financial safety. He asked about our new banking procedures and password updates. Emma faced the jury, then the empty chair where Williams had sat. No further questions, Your Honor. As Sarah Henderson stepped down, her face pale with understanding, Emma knew she'd planted seeds of doubt. But she also knew she'd made a dangerous enemy. That evening, Emma sat at her kitchen table, surrounded by legal documents, as Maria returned from her nursing shift at Memorial Hospital. Dark circles shadowed Maria's eyes, her uniform wrinkled from a 14-hour day. Mija, how was court? Maria asked, kissing Emma's head. I think I found the real thief, Mama, but I'm scared they know I found them. Maria's heart clenched. Her 7-year-old shouldn't bear this burden. But with no money for a lawyer and Michael's life at stake, they had no choice. Tell me everything, Emma. As Emma explained William's link to Henderson Construction, Maria's nursing instincts kicked in. She'd seen enough crises to recognize guilt and desperation. Be careful, Mija. Cornered animals are the most dangerous. Emma nodded, focused on the document stack. Among her father's work records, she found an oddity, a photocopy of a resignation letter from Henderson Construction dated 6 months ago. But it wasn't Williams. It was signed by David Chen, sharing the last name of Mrs. Chen, the juror. Emma's mind raced. Why was this in her father's file? Using her magnifying glass from her detective kit, she examined the letter. The signature looked too neat, too practiced. The date stamp showed it was copied 2 weeks ago, long after Williams left. Someone planted this evidence. Emma's hands trembled as she realized the implications. If Williams planted fake evidence, what else had he done? And what would he do to stop her? A noise outside made Emma freeze. A car parked across the street, headlights off. In the dark, a figure sat in the driver's seat, watching their house. Mama, Emma whispered. Someone's outside. Maria peeked through the curtain and called 911, but by the time police arrived 20 minutes later, the car was gone. Officer Martinez, who responded, was skeptical. Ma'am, there's no proof anyone was here. Could have been a neighbor's visitor. But Emma knew better. On their front walkway lay a child's toy, a small plastic gavel, like one she'd seen on William's desk during the trial. The message was clear: stop digging or face consequences. Emma gripped the toy gavel tightly. If Williams thought he could scare a 7-year-old, he was mistaken. The next day would bring the prosecution's key witness, security guard Tom Bradley, who claimed he saw Michael Rodriguez at the vault after hours. But Emma had spent the night calling Henderson Construction's security firm. What she learned would change everything. Tom Bradley had lied, and Emma had phone records to prove it. The next morning brought drama. Assistant Prosecutor Robert Williams was missing. His secretary told Judge Harrison he'd called in sick with food poisoning, but Emma noticed Mitchell's worried glances at the empty chair. Your Honor, Mitchell announced, the prosecution calls Tom Bradley to the stand. Tom Bradley, a heavy-set man in his 50s with graying hair, took the oath confidently. As Henderson Construction's night guard, his testimony was crucial. Mr. Bradley, Mitchell began, what did you see on March 15th? I was on rounds when I saw Michael Rodriguez enter the building at 11 p.m. He used his key card and went to Mr. Henderson's office. Was this unusual? Very. Employees weren't allowed after 9 o'clock p.m. without permission. Emma took notes in her childish handwriting, but something about Bradley's story bothered her. She'd spent hours calling the security firm, and what she learned was explosive. "Mr. Bradley," Mitchell continued, "what did you do when you saw Mr. Rodriguez?" "I followed him and watched through the office window. He opened the vault and took items, then used the computer for 20 minutes. "You're sure it was Michael Rodriguez?" "Absolutely. I've known him 8 years. Mitchell smiled. No further questions. Emma stood on her stool. The courtroom packed as word spread about the girl challenging the prosecutor's office. Reporters filled the back rows. "Mr. Bradley," Emma began, her voice strong, "you said you saw my dad at 11 p.m. on March 15th, right?" "That's right." Emma showed a document. "This is your time card from Secure Guard Services for March 15th. What time did you clock out?" Bradley's confidence faltered. "I'm not sure. I don't recall exactly. This record shows you clocked out at 8:47 p.m. Your shift ended at 9 o'clock p.m., but you left early. How could you see my dad at 11 p.m. if you weren't there?" The courtroom buzzed. Mitchell stood. "Objection, foundation." "Your Honor," Emma said, "I have a sworn affidavit from Mr. Peterson, the supervisor at Secure Guard Services, confirming these records." Judge Harrison reviewed it. "Overruled. Continue, Miss Rodriguez." Emma faced Bradley, now sweating. "Mr. Bradley, you weren't at Henderson Construction at 11 p.m. on March 15th, were you?" I might have mixed up dates. Or someone paid you to lie about seeing my dad." "Objection," Mitchell shouted. "Speculation." "I'll withdraw that, Your Honor," Emma said, showing another document. "Mr. Bradley, have you ever received money from Robert Williams?" Bradley's hands shook. "I don't have to answer that." "You do," Judge Harrison said firmly. "Answer." "Robert helped with some bills once, but it wasn't tied to this case." Emma's heart pounded, but her voice stayed steady. "When did Mr. Williams give you this money?" "I don't recall exactly." Emma handed a document to the clerk. "This is a check from Robert Williams to Tom Bradley dated March 20th, 5 days after you claimed to see my dad. The amount is $1,500. What were those bills, Mr. Bradley?" The courtroom fell silent except for reporters' pens. Bradley looked to Mitchell, but the prosecutor's face was ashen. I can't remember." "Mr. Bradley," Emma said, her young voice filled with righteous anger, "did Robert Williams pay you to lie about seeing my dad that night?" Adley's composure cracked. "I needed the money for my wife's medical bills. Williams said it wouldn't hurt anyone, that Rodriguez was guilty anyway." The courtroom erupted. Judge Harrison banged her gavel. "Order! Order in the court!" But Emma wasn't done. She had one more bombshell. Evidence that would expose Williams' full deception and prove her father's innocence beyond doubt. As Tom Bradley confessed his perjury, Emma knew the tide had turned. But the most dangerous part was coming. Williams was desperate, and desperate people did dangerous things. The courtroom was in chaos. Bradley's confession shattered the prosecution's case, but Emma's work wasn't over. As Judge Harrison called a recess, Emma saw Mitchell huddled with his staff, their faces grim. During the break, Maria approached, tears in her eyes. "Mija, I'm so proud, but I'm scared. What if Williams tries to hurt you?" Emma hugged her mother tightly. "Mama, Daddy said doing right isn't easy, but it's worth it. I won't let them destroy our family." When court resumed, Mitchell looked aged by 10 years. "Your Honor, given new evidence, the prosecution requests a brief recess to review our case." Judge Harrison refused. "Mr. Mitchell, you've had months to prepare. We're proceeding." Emma stood, heart racing, resolve stronger. "Your Honor, I call Frank Henderson to the stand." Frank Henderson, the elderly company owner, looked confused as he took the oath. At 72, he'd built his firm from nothing, trusting employees like family. Mr. Henderson, Emma began, you trusted my dad completely, right? Michael was like a son. This has been devastating. Emma nodded. Sir, when did you update your computer security? About 4 months ago. Robert Williams recommended we upgrade everything, citing new threats to small businesses. Emma felt the pieces align. Who helped install the new system? Robert did. He stayed late several nights to set it up properly, said he wanted us protected. Mr. Henderson, did he ask for the new passwords and access codes? Frank's face showed understanding. Yes. He said he needed them to test security. I gave him full admin access. Emma pulled her final evidence, a document she'd saved for this moment. Mr. Henderson, look at this bank statement. It shows the account where the stolen money went. Frank examined it, hands trembling. It says it's Michael's account. But what, Mr. Henderson? The address isn't Michael's. It's 1247 Oak Street, apartment 3B. That's where Robert Williams lives. I helped him move there when he left. The courtroom exploded in gasps. Emma felt triumph, tempered by knowing she'd exposed a dangerous criminal. Mr. Henderson, did Williams have access to employee personal data, like social security numbers? Yes, as our former accountant, he had all personnel files. Emma turned to the jury. Ladies and gentlemen, Robert Williams used his knowledge of Henderson Construction and my dad's personal data to open a fake account. He stole $50,000 and framed an innocent man. As Frank Henderson stepped down, remorseful for doubting Michael, Emma knew she'd proven her father's innocence. But a commotion at the courtroom's back interrupted her victory. Officer Martinez burst in, radio crackling. Your Honor, we have a situation. Robert Williams was caught fleeing to Mexico with over $100,000 in cash. He's confessed to stealing from Henderson Construction and framing Michael Rodriguez. The courtroom erupted in tears, but Emma's triumph was bittersweet. Looking at her father's tear-streaked face, she realized this was just the start of her fight for justice. Because Emma Rodriguez had found a gift for seeing truth others missed, and she'd use it to help those with nowhere to turn. The youngest lawyer in American history had won her first case, but this victory would lead to a revelation none, not even Emma, could have imagined. 3 weeks after Michael Rodriguez walked free, Emma's life changed in ways she never dreamed. The trembling girl with the oversized briefcase was now a national story. 10-year-old prodigy saves dad. Youngest lawyer in U.S. history. Child genius takes on system. But fame came with a cost Emma hadn't expected. Their Maple Street apartment was swarmed by news vans and reporters. Emma couldn't walk to the library without cameras. Maria took leave from nursing to protect Emma from the media circus. Mija, Maria said one evening watching another news report, I'm worried. You're only 7. You should be playing with dolls, not giving CNN interviews. Emma looked up from letters sent that day. Pleas from families nationwide who couldn't afford lawyers. Each held a story of injustice, a cry for someone to believe them. Mama, look, Emma said, holding a letter in shaky handwriting. Mrs. Patterson, from Alabama, says her grandson was wrongly accused of selling drugs. The evidence doesn't make sense, but no one listens because she's a grandmother. Maria's heart ached, seeing her daughter's innocence battle her sense of justice. Emma, you can't save everyone. But what if I can save some? Emma replied, her brown eyes showing wisdom beyond her years. What if God gave me this gift for a reason? The next morning, Judge Harrison visited, her stern face softened. Mrs. Rodriguez, may I speak with Emma? I have a proposal. In their small living room, she explained the American Bar Association was considering a provision for gifted minors to practice law under supervision. Emma would be the first candidate. Emma, Judge Harrison said, you've shown remarkable legal skill, but you need training. Harvard Law School offers a special program for you. You'd study with professors while staying a child, fully supported. Emma's eyes widened. Harvard, law school, the place she'd dreamed of while reading library books. But there was a catch. You'd move to Cambridge, Massachusetts, leaving your family and friends. Emma saw the conflict in Maria's eyes. It was a lifetime opportunity, but it would split their family. "I need to think," Emma said quietly. That night, she overheard her parents' hushed talk. Michael struggled to find work since his release. His arrest's stigma lingered, despite his exoneration. "Maybe Emma's gift is our answer," Michael whispered. "If she becomes a famous lawyer, she can help families like ours, ensure no innocent person suffers what I did." But Maria's voice was tearful. "She's just a baby, Michael. I don't want to lose my girl to the world." Emma closed her eyes and decided. She'd go to Harvard, not for fame or money, but to be a voice for the voiceless, a defender of the defenseless. She didn't know it yet, but this choice would lead to the biggest case of her young life, a case testing all she'd learned and forcing her to face a truth about herself, both wonderful and terrifying. Because Emma Rodriguez was about to learn her gift for justice wasn't just unusual, it was unprecedented, set to reshape the legal system. Cambridge, Massachusetts felt like another world. Harvard Law School's ancient brick buildings towered, their ivy-covered walls, whispering legal tradition. At seventh among professors and graduate students, Emma never felt smaller or more determined. Dean Margaret Whitfield, a distinguished woman in her 60s with silver hair and kind eyes behind glasses, designed Emma's program. "Emma," she said on her first day, "you'll attend modified lectures, work with a tutor, and observe real cases in our legal clinic." Emma's tutor, Professor James Crawford, a former Supreme Court clerk specializing in constitutional law, tested her with complex hypotheticals. "Emma, imagine a confession obtained without proper Miranda rights, but physical evidence shows clear guilt. How do you proceed?" Emma thought carefully. "Professor, guilt doesn't matter if the system's broken. Allowing constitutional violations for some endangers everyone's rights." Crawford's brows rose with admiration. "Excellent reasoning. But what if the defendant committed a violent crime? What about victims?" "Then we find another way to prove guilt that respects the law," Emma replied firmly. "Justice isn't about shortcuts. It's about doing right, even when harder." 3 months into Harvard, Emma received a letter that changed everything, from a Texas maximum security prison written in careful script by David Martinez. "Dear Emma," it began, "I saw you on the news. I'm on death row for a murder I didn't commit. My court-appointed lawyer barely spoke to me, and key evidence was never shown. I have 3 months before my execution. I know you're a child, but you're my only hope." Emma read it 3 times, hands trembling. Death row, execution. Words a 7-year-old shouldn't know, but she did. She showed the letter to Crawford, who read it gravely. "Emma, death penalty cases are highly complex, needing years of experience and vast resources." "But what if—" "He's innocent," Emma asked. "What if David Martinez dies because no one listens?" Crawford studied her resolve and made a bold choice. "If you're serious, I'll help, but we're up against impossible odds." Within a week, Emma assembled a unique team. Crawford provided constitutional expertise, Sarah Chen, a third-year law student, handled research, and Dr. Patricia de Williams, a forensic expert, reviewed evidence pro bono. But when Emma called David's prison to arrange a visit, she hit a barrier. "Sorry, miss," the warden said, amused. "Children aren't allowed in maximum security facilities." "No exceptions." Emma's heart sank, but her father's words echoed. "When someone says, 'Something's impossible, mija,' that's when it's worth fighting for." The next day, she filed a federal lawsuit against the Texas Department of Criminal Justice, demanding the right to represent her client despite her age. Rodriguez v. Texas. Department of Criminal Justice made headlines. Child prodigy sues for death row client access. The legal world split. Some called it frivolous, others a landmark civil rights case. Emma cared only for David Martinez, with 3 months to live and no one else fighting for him. As she prepared for her biggest legal battle, Emma didn't know someone watched her every move, someone with a personal stake in keeping David's case buried, someone aware she was nearing a secret that could ruin careers, expose corruption, and unravel a conspiracy reaching Texas's justice system's highest levels. The girl who saved her father was about to challenge a state. The stakes couldn't be higher. The federal courthouse in Austin, Texas, buzzed with tension as Emma Rodriguez, now 8, prepared to argue for death row visitation rights. 3 networks broadcast live, with protesters crowding the courthouse steps. Judge Robert Sterling, a Reagan appointee known for strict constitutional views, eyed Emma with curiosity and concern. "Miss Rodriguez, you understand the gravity of your request? Maximum security facilities restrict ages for safety." Emma stood at the defendant's table, flanked by Crawford and Harvard law students. Despite her size, her voice rang clear. "Your Honor, the Sixth Amendment ensures every defendant adequate representation. David Martinez chose me as his lawyer. The state can't deny that right based on my age." Texas Attorney General Patricia Collins, a formidable woman in her 50s, rose. "Your Honor, this isn't just about age. Maximum security facilities house dangerous criminals. No child should face that environment, regardless of legal skill." Emma was ready. "Your Honor, I'm not asking for open access. I request supervised attorney-client meetings in a secure room like any Texas lawyer." As arguments continued, Emma noticed something odd. Whenever she mentioned David's case details, Collins glanced at a tall, thin man in the courtroom's back, taking constant notes with cold eyes. During the lunch break, Crawford pulled Emma aside. "Emma, I've researched David Martinez's case. There are disturbing inconsistencies. The key witness who identified him changed his story 3 times. The murder weapon was found 2 weeks after the crime scene was secured, and the DNA evidence was processed by a now discredited lab." "So, he's innocent?" Emma asked, though she'd suspected from his letters. "More than that," Crawford said grimly. "I think someone framed him and they're nervous. You're involved." That afternoon, Judge Sterling ruled, "This court recognizes this case's unique nature, but the Sixth Amendment guarantees chosen counsel. Miss Rodriguez may visit her client with appropriate security." Emma's victory was cut short. David Martinez's execution was moved up 2 months. Instead of 3 months, she had 4 weeks. "This is unusual," Crawford told Emma, reviewing the order. "Execution dates rarely shift without major cause." Emma studied the document, her 8-year-old mind grappling with implications. "Professor, what if someone wants David dead before we prove his innocence?" The next day brought worse news. Dr. Patricia Williams, the forensic expert, called. "Emma, I tried accessing David's original evidence, but it's been destroyed. DNA, fingerprints, even the murder weapon. They claim routine disposal, but the timing's suspicious." Emma felt fear but also resolve. "Dr. Williams, they can destroy evidence but not witnesses. David's original lawyer and prosecutor are alive. If we can't prove innocence with evidence, we'll use truth." What Emma didn't know was the prosecutor who convicted David 15 years ago now held immense power, making her investigation far riskier. As Emma prepared for her death row visit, she was walking into a 15-year-old trap, one testing her legal skills, courage, wisdom, and belief that justice was worth any sacrifice. Time was running out for David Martinez, but it was also running out for those who framed him, because Emma Rodriguez was coming, bringing truth. Huntsville State. Penitentiary's maximum security unit felt like another realm. Emma passed multiple checkpoints, her 8-year-old hand tiny against the massive doors clanging shut. Guard Captain Morrison, stern yet kind, escorted her to the attorney conference room. "Miss Rodriguez," he said softly, "in 30 years here, I've never seen this. That man has claimed innocence daily for 8 years, never caused trouble, never lost hope. Most death row inmates change. David hasn't. Makes you wonder." When Emma saw David Martinez through the reinforced glass, her heart broke. At 35, he looked older than her father, his dark hair graying early, eyes holding endless sorrow. But his smile showed hope. "You must be Emma," David said through the intercom, his voice gentle despite his ordeal. "I can't believe a little girl is fighting for me when the system gave up." Emma opened her new properly sized briefcase. "Mr. Martinez, I believe you're innocent." Tell me about the night Patricia Hendris was murdered. David's story was heart-wrenching. 15 years ago, he was a college student working part-time at a convenience store. That night, he studied at the library until closing, then went home. The police arrested me 3 days later, David said. A witness claimed he saw me leaving Patricia's building around the murder time, but Emma, I'd never met her. I didn't know she existed until they accused me. Emma took notes, her young mind spotting inconsistencies. Who was this witness? A man named Thomas Walsh. He said he saw me fleeing the building. But Emma, I was at the library that night. I checked out 3 books at 9:15 p.m., 15 minutes before the murder. The library was 2 miles away. Emma's pulse raced. Mr. Martinez, do you have the library receipts? David's face fell. My lawyer said they weren't important. He never showed them at trial. After her visit, Emma returned to Harvard, burning with resolve. She called Austin Public Library and spoke with Mrs. Henderson, the head librarian. Miss Rodriguez, I recall that night clearly, Mrs. Henderson said. David Martinez was a regular, polite, dedicated student. He was here until we closed at 9:30 p.m. He asked to borrow extra books for criminal justice studies. Emma's hands shook as she noted the statement. David couldn't have committed the murder. He had an ironclad alibi never presented. But the revelation that shattered her understanding came when she researched David's original prosecutor, District Attorney William Morrison, now Texas Attorney General. The same Morrison with power to shift execution dates. The same Morrison in the courtroom's back during her hearing, taking notes with cold eyes. Emma's heart pounded as the pieces aligned. Morrison built his career on high-profile convictions. The Martinez case was his stepping stone. Proving David's innocence would ruin Morrison's career and expose decades of misconduct. But Emma's most shocking find was about Thomas Walsh, the original witness. Public records showed he died in a car crash 6 months after testifying. Yet Emma discovered he received $50,000 from an anonymous source a week before the trial. Someone paid Walsh to lie, then eliminated him when he became a liability. Emma's hands shook as she called Crawford. Professor, I think David Martinez was framed by the same person now trying to execute him before we prove his innocence. Crawford's voice was grim. Emma, if you're right, you're not just fighting for one man. You're challenging a conspiracy at Texas' highest levels. Emma looked at David's photo on her desk, a man on death row for 8 years for a crime he didn't commit, his execution 2 weeks away. Then that's what we'll do, Professor. We'll take them all down. But Emma didn't know Morrison had monitored her investigation and just made a decision putting her in grave danger. The conspiracy was about to strike back, willing to harm a child to keep secrets buried. 10 days before David's execution, Emma received a chilling call. The disguised voice was clear. Stop the Martinez case, little girl, or you and your family will regret it. Emma's hands trembled as she hung up, but her resolve grew. She called FBI agent Sarah Chen, who'd been investigating Texas justice system corruption. Emma, Chen said on a secure video call, we've built a case against Morrison for 3 years. Your work gave us the missing pieces, but you're in real danger. Morrison's career and freedom depend on David dying before the truth emerges. Emma stayed in a secure apartment near Harvard, guarded by federal marshals, but felt time slipping. Her team filed emergency appeals, presented new evidence, and petitioned the governor for clemency. But Morrison's influence seemed to block every move. Professor Crawford, Emma said during a late-night strategy session, what if we can't save David through courts? What if the system's too corrupt? Crawford looked at his 8-year-old student with sadness. Emma, sometimes the system fails good people. Sometimes justice is delayed so long it becomes injustice. But Emma refused defeat. She'd learned a truth many adults missed. Sometimes the strongest weapon against corruption was simple truth spoken bravely. So she decided to shock the nation. She called a press conference for David's execution morning, inviting every major news outlet. Ladies and gentlemen, Emma began, behind a podium adjusted for her height. I'm Emma Rodriguez, here to expose the greatest injustice I've witnessed. For 20 minutes she presented her case with precision, library records proving David's alibi, financial records showing Walsh was paid to lie, and Morrison's pattern of misconduct. David Martinez has been on death row 8 years because William Morrison needed a conviction to boost his career, Emma declared, her young voice heavy with conviction. In 6 hours, an innocent man will die unless we stop this travesty. Her most powerful moment came when she faced the cameras. I'm 8 years old, she said, voice breaking with emotion. I should be in 3rd grade worrying about spelling tests and playground fights. Instead, I'm fighting for a man's life because adults meant to protect justice failed him. She paused, summoning strength. David Martinez wrote me because he had no one else. He believed even a child could see truth when adults refused. Today, I ask you to be children again, to see this case with clear eyes and honest hearts, to demand justice because it's right. Emma's press conference aired live nationwide. Social media exploded with support. Protesters swarmed the Texas Capitol. The governor's phone lines jammed with clemency demands. But Morrison wasn't done. In the shadows, he planned a final move to silence Emma. As the clock ticked toward David's execution, Emma didn't know she'd painted a target on herself. Morrison decided if he was falling, he wouldn't fall alone. The girl who began this to save her father faced her greatest test. Legal briefs and courtroom arguments wouldn't save her now. The final confrontation loomed, and only one would emerge with integrity intact. At 5:47 p.m. on David's supposed final day, Emma sat in a secure FBI conference room, watching a critical call. FBI agent Sarah Chen held the receiver, tension in her eyes. Governor Williams, Chen said, we have undeniable proof David Martinez is innocent and William Morrison for sin. I met him. We need the execution stayed now. Emma held her breath. After months of fighting, exposing corruption, and risking her safety, it came to this. Yes, sir, Chen continued. I understand the political stakes, but an innocent man's life is at risk. Outside, news vans lined up. Emma's press conference had sparked public outrage. Hashtags, Save David Martinez and Justice. For Emma trended globally. Celebrities, politicians, and citizens demanded answers. But Morrison fought back. At 6 p.m., breaking news flashed. Texas Attorney General William Morrison arrested on federal conspiracy charges. Emma gasped as Morrison was led away in handcuffs, his career ending in disgrace. FBI raids uncovered evidence of David's wrongful conviction and decades of corruption. Chen hung up, smiling broadly. Emma, Governor Williams granted David Martinez a full pardon. He's free. Emma cried tears of relief and joy. Against impossible odds, she'd saved a man's life and exposed a vast conspiracy. But the greatest revelation awaited. 3 hours later, Emma stood outside Huntsville State Penitentiary as David Martinez walked free. At 35, he looked aged, but his eyes shone with freedom. Emma, he said, kneeling, tears streaming, you gave me my life back. How can I thank you? Emma hugged him tightly. Mr. Martinez, just live the life you were meant to. The media frenzy was unprecedented, but the true impact wasn't fame or Hollywood offers. It was a call from Chief Justice Margaret Roberts of the Supreme Court. Emma, Roberts said, your work is miraculous. You've exposed flaws in our justice system we can't ignore. Emma listened as Roberts explained that her case prompted an emergency review of the legal system. Congress is drafting the Martinez Act, judicial reform to prevent wrongful convictions and ensure no innocent person faces execution. But the next revelation stunned Emma. Your legal brief in the Martinez case is a masterpiece, studied in law schools. Emma Rodriguez, at 8, you're the youngest person to overturn a death sentence, expose corruption, and inspire federal law. You're a legal pioneer. 6 months later, Emma stood in the White House Rose Garden as President Johnson signed the Martinez Act. David Martinez, now a victims' rights advocate, stood beside her. Emma, the president said, handing her the ceremonial pen, you've shown justice isn't about age or experience. It's about courage, determination, and belief in truth. Emma looked at the crowd, her parents, Crawford, Judge Harrison, and hundreds who supported her. But her eyes found David, the man she'd saved. Mr. President, Emma said, voice strong, my dad said doing right isn't easy, but it's worth it. Today, I know he was right. As applause rang out, Emma, now 9, knew her journey was beginning. She'd saved one man, but thousands needed her. The trembling girl in the courthouse had become a force, moving mountains, changing laws, proving the smallest voice could speak the loudest truth. In a Texas prison, William Morrison sat, paying for his crimes, while David Martinez walked free under a sun once set to end his life. Justice, Emma learned, wasn't just winning G cases. It was ensuring no one, young, small, or powerless, faced injustice alone. The youngest lawyer in history had become a beacon of hope for those told their fight was impossible, and Emma Rodriguez was just getting started.